Welcome friends to another r/entitled parents video. Today we've got a crazy story of an evil mother getting somebody robbed. But first, a story from Holden position 4. Parents decided to cancel my 14th birthday to accommodate my spoiled younger brother. Reinstated it when I told everyone at school. I'm 20-year-old male, and this happened when I was 14. I have a brother that's about 6 years younger than me, and he was extra coddled by my parents for having been diagnosed with high-functioning autism when he was 4. But other than that, he seems very normal, just unbelievably spoiled. And he used to get his way a lot. And by a lot, I mean nearly all the time. Anything I had, he also had to have. So that meant he had doubles of almost everything that wasn't shared items. And anything he had that I didn't, he'd rub in my face any way he could. When I was 11, I begged my parents for a 3DS for my 12th birthday. I got one, but was told to lend it to my brother whenever he wanted it or else I'd have it taken away. Which it was. A lot. When my aunt found out after seeing my parents forcibly take my 3DS out of my hands to give to my brother on one of her visits, she let loose on them for such blatant favoritism. They returned my 3DS immediately, then blamed me for the situation after my aunt left. But they didn't make me give it to my brother again. Instead, my parents went out a few days later and bought another 3DS as a surprise gift for my brother. On several of mine and other people's birthdays, my brother made a huge fuss because the party wasn't all about him, even going so far as to outright state that he was upset because he wasn't getting any gifts or getting to blow out the candles on the cake. My parents learned the hard way that they couldn't enable my brother the way they'd liked at all those parties. And they were actually kicked out of a few for trying. And because of that, other kids at his school stopped inviting him to birthday parties altogether. For me, my birthdays were some of the only days I had that I got to have about me, because otherwise my parents forced my life to revolve around my little brother. And the year prior to when this story took place, my parents ended up paying more attention to him the entire time of my 13th birthday. And even asked me if I'd let my brother blow out my candles for me because he was upset and pouting. I refused that because I wanted to blow out my own candles. They called me a spoiled brat at first, till my aunt intervened and chastised them on their favoritism yet again, and stated how much she noticed how my brother gets nearly everything between the two of us just because he's autistic. My parents got no support from anyone else there other than my brother, who was still crying because he wasn't getting to blow out my candles. And because he didn't get his way, he tried to outright spit on my cake out of spite. But my awesome aunt thankfully blocked him before he got the chance, then scolded him till he ran to my mom in tears. My parents took a lot of heat from the other adults there, and then promised to never ask me to let my brother blow out my candles again. But they pretty much just went through the motions for the rest of the party. My aunt pretty much took over coordinating everything from that point. The following year, a couple of weeks before my birthday, my parents sat me down and told me they were still gonna get me some gifts and a small cake. But my birthday party was effectively canceled to avoid my brother having another meltdown. I told them I couldn't believe they were doing this to me, and they just seemed to shrug it off without a care. So at school over the next week, I told my friends, my teachers, and even my school counselor. All of them were appalled by my parents' lack of consideration or empathy. The vice principal even found out and consoled me. And all of this got back to my parents through social media. My parents ended up grounding and gaslighting me for telling so many people, but that didn't stop me from still telling everyone at school that I was being grounded for just being upset my birthday was canceled for no good reason. I guess that made it a lot worse because several of my parents' own friends, along with parents to other kids in my school, called them up or sent them Facebook messages basically saying, "What the heck is wrong with you?" And suddenly I was ungrounded. I didn't get an apology either. My dad just walked into my room with his arms crossed, told me my grounding was over early, and then walked out. That was it. I thought my party was still canceled because nobody said anything about it. And my brother thought it was hilarious and rubbed it in my face that I wasn't going to get to celebrate. But by the end of the 2 weeks, my parents held a surprise party for me at my favorite restaurant, and then started claiming that was their intent all along. I knew it wasn't. From what I'd seen, everyone was incredibly unhappy with them for what they did, and it showed with any interactions family members had with my parents. So they ended up doing a surprise party to try and save what little of their reputations they had left. But I'm pretty sure they had to pay through the nose that day just to accommodate me. I got dinner with all my friends at my favorite restaurant that had a small arcade, and even got the PS4 game system I'd been jonesing for at the time. I could tell it was all pretty much planned and bought last minute because my dad had a look about him that my aunt comically described as looking like a moth had flown out of his wallet. My brother, of course, made a huge fuss that I got that surprise party, but with so many friends and their parents there, my mom and dad finally put their feet down on my brother to stop his tantrum when he wanted to push my cake off the table. My brother ended up getting a timeout for the first time since he was a toddler, and my mom had to stay with him to make sure he didn't do anything crazy. And he did try several times to run to the cake or stack of presents. Who knows what he would have done were it not for the fact that at least one adult was always on guard. Even my dad took guard to keep him away. My mom ended up having to remove my brother and herself from the party entirely and took my little bro to a McDonald's nearby so he could have fun in their play area. And I heard later she spent at least an hour trying to get him to come out of the play place tube structure. And he only did so because he had to use the bathroom, then tried to run right back in again. My parents never tried to cancel my birthday again while I still lived with them, though they never again tried as hard or spent as much. For the remaining 4 years I was under their roof, my birthday parties consisted of a local pizza parlor, a cake without even my name written on it, and never again anything as expensive as a new gaming system. I don't mean to sound spoiled, but I was a bit disappointed I never got a cake with my name on it again. My aunt called my parents out on that each year, and each year they claimed they forgot to get the cake decorated. I'm pretty sure the reason my name was never written on another cake was my brother always refused to eat pieces of cake that had writing of someone else's name on it at any party. And they couldn't put his name on any of my cakes or it would have looked very bad for them. But the fact that I still got a day that was just about me at all and not my brother was still fantastic in my book, especially because just about everything else revolved around him. During each of my remaining birthday parties while still living at home with my brother, he made a fuss, and my mom took him somewhere else to calm him down. I was still required to share my PS4 with my brother, but it was still mine, and I took it with me when I moved out at 18. Little bro did not like that, and had a huge fit till my parents went out and bought another PS4 for him. When I moved out, they finally had to deal with how they'd raised my brother so spoiled because I wasn't there to help them with him anymore. On his recent 14th birthday, he went mental on our parents for not getting him a PS5. He's now currently grounded for I don't know how long, after causing hundreds or maybe even thousands in collateral damage during his rampage. He picked up a chair and just started destroying anything that was in front of him with it. And my parents just looked mentally checked out when I saw them last. My aunts also told me that they confided in her that they wish they could send my brother to military or boarding school in the future because they can't handle the monster they created anymore. But there's no way they could afford that. I'd be lying if I said I didn't find it ironically funny. Would you guys agree with me when I say that the only people to blame here in this situation are those parents for not raising their kids better? Like, especially considering their condition, you think that they would want to try to take the time to basically work through these emotions and try to have like ramped down type behaviors or procedures or just find ways to de-escalate the not so nice behaviors. But no, their answer was just give them the 3DS, give them the PS4, give them the entire birthday party. Come on, son, can't you just let us write your brother's name on your birthday cake and also let him blow it out, and also he doesn't want to eat anything with your name on it, so we can't have your name on it either? It's a small ask, and if you say no, you're grounded. Do you feel bad for them at all? There's only two people to blame here, right? Let me know in the comments down below. Our next story is from Edmund Blackadder V. Mother's Day. Come to bring cake, stay to cook the entire meal. Long story short, I was told to bring cake to my mother's place for yesterday. Nothing more. She said she'd handle dinner, arrived to find the kitchen table overflowing with groceries, and her expecting me to spend the entire day cooking a proper Italian-American feast for the whole family. At least a dozen people. No warning, was never asked to do it, not even hinted at. Just expected to happily roll up my sleeves and get it cooking for 4+ hours while everyone else lounged around enjoying themselves. So I left and took the cake with me. If you show up to your own mother's place with a cake and you find out that they want to drop a 4+ hour cooking session on you without you ever having agreed to it, do you think it's fair game to take your cake and leave your mother there just stranded with the burden of cooking this Italian-American feast last minute? Or would you begrudgingly be rolling up your sleeves? Let me know in the comments. By the way, if you're enjoying these stories, make sure to hit those like and subscribe buttons down below so you never miss any of my daily videos. Every video has great stories, like our next story from ex-lifeguard throwaway. Ma'am, I'm a lifeguard, not your babysitter. So there was a small incident in my pool a few years back in the summer of 2014. One of the first years I'd, 22-year-old male at the time of the incident, worked as a lifeguard. It's nothing as grandiose as some of the other encounters people on here have had, but I figured I could share it here. For background, it's a small HOA pool that struggles to staff people to the point where there's only one lifeguard on duty at a time, if we're even that lucky. The pay isn't terrible, and you only have to work 4.5 hours for a shift. But you also get to deal with some entitled folks now and then, so you win some, you lose some, I guess. There's a section in the rules that specifically states that unless a child is 16 or over, they must have a parent or guardian at the pool with them. I've never had to enforce that up until that day. A woman, our entitled parent of the day, came in with a 5-year-old, set the kid down, and went to leave. Now, as we require people to bring passes so we know they're part of the neighborhood, as well as to make sure that they're not part of the list of people barred from entrance due to being behind on payments or other disputes, I called out to her and politely asked her if she had her passes. She stops, has a slightly annoyed look on her face before walking back around the pool to give me the child's pass, and then goes to leave again. I then ask if she has her pass or an ID on her, and she continues walking off to the exit, presumably not having heard me. I then ask the child to stay and go after her, letting her know that she has to present a pool pass or photo ID if she wants to stay. It's at this point that she tells me, very rudely I might add, that she isn't staying. Has some things to do and will be back in an hour, and would I just go watch her kid? I reply as calmly as I can that I cannot allow her child to be on pool property without supervision. You're here, aren't you? Just do your job and watch her then, was the entitled mother's response. To which I replied, my job is an associate at Walmart and a lifeguard here, ma'am, not a babysitter. If you'd like my services as one, my fee is $25 an hour, but otherwise I'll need you to either stay here and give me your pool pass or driver's license, the other form of ID we take if someone doesn't have their pass on them, or pay the $2 guest pass fee, or take your child and leave. Apparently my smart butt attitude didn't please her because she took offense and demanded to speak to the person in charge. I probably should not have done this, but I just said that she was speaking to them, being the only person on duty at the time, and later this would be true, as I would become the head lifeguard the very next year. However, if she wished to speak to the head of the pool committee, I would be more than happy to give them a call, which she said I should do, along with several words and adjectives that should not have been said around her child, as she told me she was going to report me for my attitude to her and for not doing my job. I went over to my phone and called my boss and let him know the situation before handing the phone to the woman. I couldn't hear what was said, but it was clear he asked what had been said because she repeated my comment verbatim. All I heard after she finished was my boss's laughter. Needless to say, the poor child did not get to go to the pool that day, and that's the only thing I regret about all this. This isn't the only entitled person/parent story I have from my time working as a lifeguard, and I hope I can share more soon. Frankly, I don't know if it would be right or wrong, but if I was OP in that situation and somebody tried to dump their 5-year-old child there, I would call out to them and be like, hey, if you leave, I'm calling child services. You can't just abandon your kid here. Would that be a wrong thing to do, or would that actually be like the right thing to do? I'm kind of curious. Our next story is from CastFan203. Entitled parent called me privileged for using a disabled space. Some context. I, 18-year-old female, have a heart condition and a hip condition. I have to use a wheelchair to get around. I can walk, but only for a short distance before I either get tired or my hips start hurting. Now, pre-COVID, my parents and I were traveling by train for a hospital trip. Just a checkup, nothing serious. I was sitting in the disabled space in my wheelchair, which had a small table and lots of space so I could get out easily. My parents were sitting on the seats beside me, reading magazines and playing games on their phones. I plugged my headphones into my laptop and started watching a movie. This was when the entitled parents came in, with a ton of luggage and a pushchair in tow. The parents started filling up the space around and behind my chair with their luggage, and because I have social anxiety, I didn't know what to do or say. Worried that if I did say anything, it would come off as rude, so I just sat there panicking. Thankfully, my mom piped up and very politely said, "Excuse me, that's a wheelchair space. Please don't put your luggage there. My daughter won't be able to get out to use the wheelchair, or if there's an emergency." The mom complained that the bays are full, which wasn't true at all. There was an empty luggage bay very close by that they could have used. My mom explained that this isn't a luggage space, it's for a disabled person. The entitled parents, of course, ignored my mom, took their toddler out of the pushchair, and then proceeded to stuff the pushchair behind my wheelchair. My dad basically repeated what my mom had said, and the entitled mother turned around and snapped. "Well, we have a small child in a pushchair, that's the same thing. We should be entitled to put our pushchair there." To which she was told, "We booked this space in advance, specially. We've paid for it. You've paid for your seats, and we've paid for this space." My dad followed this up by saying, "Imagine how you would feel if I came along and dumped my luggage by your seats." They continued to argue with my parents, until finally the train manager arrived, and it turned out they hadn't actually reserved seats at all. So they were asked to sit in the fold-down seats in the corridor with their luggage and pushchair. We thought it was the end of it, but we were wrong. They sat on just the other side of the partition door, right in the view and earshot of us, and spent the entire hour and a half of the journey complaining about how disabled people are privileged, and how we get everything we want, like luxury spaces on trains and close parking spaces. I just rolled my eyes. This is one of the many experiences I've had. My goodness, I'm so privileged. Oh darn OP having all that privilege, getting to sit down everywhere, use that wheelchair. They get all the spaces. I'm sure they just love and have so much satisfaction that they get the big stall in the bathrooms. I'm not gonna lie though, I've gone on car rides with relatives who've had a disability like a leg issue, and they have one of those blue parking placards, and getting to just park right up by the entrance is pretty nice. But you realize these people struggle to get around, especially if you're in a wheelchair. So while there is an aspect of it that you can, understandably be jealous of, you wish that you could have ample space, or you wish you could park right up by the door, you have to realize there's commonly a lifelong or at least long-term trade-off in people's overall lives to get that kind of luxury. Our next story is from Project Nature Kurisu. Raging jerk dad decides to go off on me when I picked him up from the airport. I've posted before about how my dad was a raging jerk on Mother's Day in a previous post. What I didn't mention was how his anger was blamed on alcoholism and drugs he was taking to combat his crippling back pain, and then one day he woke up and now says he's thinking straight. Apparently his definition of waking up is hurting the nearest person, in this case my mom, and then telling everyone to just let him do what he wants for a month. Unfortunately, I've recently come to find that he's since woken up, that both he and my mom are both complete narcissists. This just happened. I'm posting the same night this occurred, in the darkness and silence of my bedroom, and what a coincidence that it just so happens to be right around Mother's Day again. My parents went on vacation to Cancun last week, and left it up to me and my youngest brother to watch over the pets and take care of the house. This was not a problem. They also tasked me to pick them up from the airport when they got back. This should have been easy. On the day the plane arrived, I waited with my ringer on so I wouldn't miss any calls or texts. Then around 8:30 p.m., I got a text from my mom saying that I could start heading over now. And I left around 5 minutes after getting the message with a message of my own to state that I was on my way and to call me. The car had Bluetooth with phone and let me know where to pick them up. Mistake number one, I was told to head over, but it was too early. They weren't ready to be picked up, and airports are extremely busy. You can't park at arrival gates and wait for whoever you're picking up to come out. So I had to drive around the airport a grand total of 4 times because I couldn't find a place to lawfully park and wait. Mistake number 2, my dad, who called me on the phone, wouldn't tell me where I actually had to pick them up from, and instead opted to just jump out at me in the middle of the road to get my attention. I nearly lost it at him for that. That was stupid. He should have just told me to pull over where they were on my phone instead. Mistake number 3, I was already fed up with the attitudes of both my parents at this point. I simply wanted to get home and vow to never do them any more vacation driving favors. I could have said so in the car, but because my mom said she didn't want any grief since her vacation was ending tonight, I clammed up to try and preserve some sense of peace. I forgot to set my GPS for home before the shock of the stupidity of the jump scare my dad decided to pull. And since I'd already started driving, try to return home from memory. That was when my dad started backseat driving and distracting me, telling me to get out of this lane. Well, folks, can anyone tell me what the implication of such a phrase would mean to someone driving? If you thought it would mean to merge into the next lane over, then you'd be thinking like me. Because when I heard that, that's exactly what I did. Unfortunately, that distraction prevented me from getting over all the way into the leftmost lanes where I actually needed to go. He asked why we were going the way we ended up going, and I answered to him truthfully, saying that I did as he asked. His response was to raise his voice and start going off on me. I pulled over a minute later and intended to tell him off, as they were both being very rude to me, and he drops his golden line upon me that I'm not worth being treated with any consideration because I didn't have a job. It's hard to describe in text how hurtful the "you don't work" argument actually comes off, but basically they can do no wrong and get to treat me like crap because I'm not employed. Never mind that I've been paying my bills every month, loaned them money when they needed it, helped them out without compensation, and done them plenty of favors, including several they had no problems exploiting the fact that I was unemployed to do, including picking them up from the airport that night instead of having them take an Uber or a cab, because both of my brothers have work in the morning. He yelled at me for making a wrong turn and then immediately saw it still went the right way and didn't apologize, even tried to defend his actions. This man emotionally broke me a long time ago, and for the first time in a long time, I cried. I felt tears well up as they had the gall to act like nothing had happened, trying to talk to me like I wasn't just wrongly screamed at, fishing for excuses to yell at me, but being left with nothing to argue at me about because I had done only what they asked before picking them up. I refused to let my mom hug me when I got home because I was still upset, and went into my room as soon as possible and started writing this post. I'm sure they'll try to give some half-baked apology with a lecture sprinkled in that shifts most of the blame at me tomorrow. I won't accept it. Here's the kicker. My dad's 52 and hasn't worked in 14 years. I would just highly advise that OP tries to get out of that situation as soon as they can, and frankly, once OP can get out of that situation, I would recommend them be completely honest about how they feel. Tell them about all the grief they've given you, all the unjust treatment you feel you've gotten, the anxiety, the stress, and basically if they don't want to apologize and try to make things better, now that you're out of that situation, contact's gonna start going down and down until they do. But honestly, I wish the best for OP. I've dealt with people like that too, who flip out and yell at the slightest of situations and just makes everything 100 times more stressful than it ever needs to be, and it wears down on you so hard. So a lot of respect to them, and I wish them the best. And our final story of the day is by Scared for Life 2004. My mother ruined my friendships and got us robbed. Context: I was 8, I'm currently 18, I'm female and have way more stories to tell. I currently have a story posted on my profile because I'm not allowed to post it on here. We had just moved into a house at this time, and my father was working all the time. My sister couldn't walk yet, and my brother was at school with me. Okay, so entitled mother loved to invite my friends over and humiliate me. More than once, she would punish me whenever they came over and treat me horribly. She would treat them like angels, however. Anyway, on this specific day, my mother had invited another one of her friends, male. He acted all buddy-buddy with her and went to the basement. I tried to follow, but my mother pulled me into the living room. She says, "OP, stay here. Me and my friend are going to hang out in the basement. Why don't you feed your sister?" I say, "You didn't clean the bottle today?" Entitled mother says, "Then change her, I'm busy." She went down there and left me to my own devices. I had changed my little sister's diaper and then spent the day playing with her and trying to teach her how to walk. Hours later, when the sun was going down, my mom came out with the guy. She laughed and joked around with him, and when he left, she had grabbed me and reminded me of the #1 rule: never tell your dad a man was in the house, understand? I remember nodding, as always, and then going to bed. The next day, I was wakened up by my dad, who got me and my brother ready for school. I then got a ride from my mom and spent the day there. Well, she walked me in and pulled me around. The schools did those things where you color trash and make a board of colors with it. I remember wanting to look at them so I could do one, but I was yelled for it. Entitled mother yelled, "Hurry up, you need to get to class and I need to go home." I was pushed inside the classroom. After my mother ruined my friendships, I was forced to sit alone. I had to sit in this one seat right by the board. All the kids at their tables connected into a big square while I sat alone. At the end of the day, we were all forced to stand outside, and everyone was picked up slowly. Finally, after the teacher was close to taking me to the office, Entitled mother showed up. She grabbed my hand and my brother's wrist and dragged us off. I remember being so scared because of how hard she was dragging us. I said, "Mom, what's going on?" Entitled mother said, "Mother, OP, we were robbed, okay? We need to hurry to the car before your father gets home now." I kept asking what did she mean by robbed, but I remember she just told me to shut up and get into the car. We then got home. Now, for info, our dad doesn't have an amazing job, but he didn't make little money. After saving up, he was able to get us a 3D TV, 3D DVD player, and an Xbox 360. This is when they were new. Well, all of it was gone. All our dad's days and nights meant for nothing. Turns out it was that guy she invited over the night before. He had pushed the air conditioning in, and he and his friends stole all our crap. Well, later my dad found our landlord's wife, she hates us and we're neighbors, had watched us get robbed and didn't even call the cops or anything. She said it was none of her business. My dad was devastated and my mom didn't care, though she did get yelled at for having a guy over, so yay. Now, what were they going down to the basement to do? Were they playing Monopoly with each other? Little bit of Yahtzee? Maybe a good game of Scrabble down in the basement? You know, a nice solid game that takes a few hours and then you come back up laughing, enjoying the time you spent together? Also, in your guys' opinions, if a neighbor is there and they witness and can identify that you're being robbed, and they choose to do nothing, they don't alert the cops, they don't try to alert any authorities, they don't try to call you if they have your number, should they be liable for anything? Or do you think they should reserve the right to be able to witness and understand what's going on, but also just choose not to report anything? I'd like to know your guys' thoughts in the comments down below. But with that being said, that's all the time we have for today. Now, if you want to see an entitled parent story that was even more insane than the ones in this video, click on the left video, or if you missed my latest video, click on the right. With that said, I'll see you next time for some more stories.